Great. Rob, Pedro, wonderful to have both of you here.
Good.
Good to be here.
Yeah, I've been waiting to discuss this topic with the two of you for a very long time. I think I've seen many people got very upset when you say to them that your job is not to save lives. They don't like
Yeah.
it. But let's just talk about it. What is this idea of safety is all about saving lives? Um,
Okay. One of the things that really is annoying about the risk and safety industry is its appalling understanding of language. So, for example, I drove on a bridge today and it didn't fall down, so therefore engineers save lives. I spoke to a clergyman, a minister of religion, and he offered to save my life. If I would confess my sins to Jesus Christ, he would save my life. Or maybe social workers save lives, nurses save lives. And so after a while, if you keep talking like this, there's nothing that doesn't save lives. If I follow the road rules, then the road rules save my life. Why? How do they actually save lives?
yes, that's a really good point. Yes. Um, let's talk about where does this myth actually come from, Rob? Where does this
Well,
get
it's
energy
a
from?
salvation myth. It's a theory of salvation, and it's all about the language of salvation. Now, what's really interesting is the industry personifies itself when it says it saves someone, which is fascinating. Safety saves lives. Okay, do they mean that the industry and the activity of the industry stop people from getting killed? Is that what they mean? Or do they mean that safety is an act and that the act of doing safety saves lives? Because safety is only ever a temporary outcome. Safety is never permanent. Um,
The thing that puzzles me is that parents are utmost responsibilities to keep their children safe. And more recently even, it's the society's responsibility to make sure that they save their children. It's come to the absurd that playing grounds are safeguard against anything to an absurdity. So there's this obsession that is far larger than safety, it would seem, that someone other than ourselves are responsible for saving us from ourselves, perhaps.
well, yeah, but that raises two things, Pedro. First of all, what are we saved from, and what are we saved for? Right? And thirdly, how many people in our society talk about the task of saving people? How many people? I don't hear any engineers talking about that they save lives, right? And yet, how many people are saved every year because an engineer did his job properly? Buildings don't fall down, bridges don't break, aeroplanes still fly. But you don't hear engineers use that language. You hear clergy use that language. You hear religious people talking about saving lives. But you don't hear doctors and nurses talking about saving lives, even though they do. But they don't use the language of salvation. They use the language of care and helping. If I care for you and we get you the right medication, your body will save itself. But it's only in the risk and safety world that we hear this silly language about saving lives.
Absolutely.
And they use religious language all the time to describe what they do, and it creates the most extraordinary arrogance.
Yes. Rob, you often talk about the idea of the archetype of safety with the capital S. It's not
Yes.
something that is understood in the risk and safety world. I think people take it personally, as if it's an attack on them, when all you're saying is
Yep.
that it's the dominant pattern of human behavior that you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
It's what
Listen to the language.
seduces. Yeah. Fascinating. What are the practical implications of this trajectory, Rob? What do you think about that?
Well, I think you shouldn't talk about it at all. Be like the social worker or the doctor or the nurse. I
Yeah.
don't think the industry thinks about its language at all. Pedro's example's very good. What have you saved us for? What have you saved us to? And so, we now know that the obsession with saving children from risk through helicopter parenting is actually harming them. So
There's
if you
enough evidence
save
of
a
that.
person from risk, you're also punishing them from learning. And so my question to safety is, you better tell me what you actually mean. Safety saves you from what? For what? If you're saving me from risk, then you're actually punishing me by taking opportunities from learning from me. So you're not saving me at all. You're actually harming me. But,
Yes.
and it's quite dogmatic too, by the way. It's a dogma. Safety saves lives. It's like, if you go to any, I'm not familiar with Hindu, but if you go to any Christian church in the UK or Portugal, you'll find a sign out the front, Jesus saves.
Yes. Rob,
It's
it's so
dogma.
interesting, yeah, what we are discussing, because I have had this discussion with so many people to say that your job is not to save people's lives, and they don't
No.
get it. We
My
assume
job is to
far
help
too-
people tackle risk. That's the language. My job is to help people tackle risk. I'm a helper. The nurse's job is to help you look after your body and get well. The social worker facilitates and brings strategies to help your family in crisis to heal itself, right? The language is we are helpers.
Perhaps we should talk a little bit more about this idea of helping, Rob, because I think even that part of the language is not very well understood. When we say our job is to
No.
help people, how do you explain that? What should we do in the name of
Well,
helping people?
I had a friend of mine who was a leading counsellor in, he was a mentor of mine for 50 years. He died at the age of 94 during COVID. So he died 2 years ago. And he wrote a book called Walking Alongside. Walking Alongside. And the subtitle of his book is How to Be a Helper. And his metaphor for helping is to walk alongside. Now that's the same word for teacher. The Greek word for teaching is pedagogy, pedagogia. And so the pedagogue was not the teacher in ancient Greece. The pedagogue was the person who walked the child to school, to the gymnasium. So the pedagogue walks beside. That's what the teacher should do. And the same goes for the helper. The helper is the one who walks alongside as an equal, not superior. If I'm saving lives, then I'm already superior.
Isn't that remarkable? Because just reading through the Bhagavad Gita a couple of days ago, Rob, one of the things, the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, it's basically is a symbol of God talking to a common man. And the idea is, what is the meaning of so so uh, at one point he says, what you really need is a little bit of dissonance. uh, Krishna is
Yeah.
not ready to go in the battlefield, and sorry, Arjuna is not ready to go in the battlefield, and Krishna is trying to help him. And at one stage he says to the god, he says, "Why are you being so heavy on me?" He said, "I'm not being heavy on you. I'm just putting you in dissonance." And this is very
Yes.
important when you're caught up in this worldview in which you are, which is not
Yes.
serving you and not serving the society. And I see
No.
precisely what you do with many people. You put them in dissonance, and then they're
Yes.
made to think
You
of their
can't- and
worldview.
you, yeah, well,
And I think that is a
it's
very
actually
close. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say one last thing, that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
how you help. So my point really is that the way to help people is to help themselves, is to make them question their worldview. Very few
Yes,
people
yes.
do that. Most people are married to the idea that we must not uh, upset people. We must say things in
Hmm.
a way that they don't sound confronting. And you end up in a position where nothing moves, nothing changes at all. So if you really want to help
Correct.
people, I think this is such a good approach, is to question people where they are in the first instance. It's
Yes.
wonderful.
And
yeah.
it's interesting, if I go back to the early Greek days, the pedagogue, the person who walked alongside, asked questions of the child and put them in dissonance. And of course Socrates did exactly the same, is you ask questions.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because every audit, every investigation, every inspection template that you see is about directing questions, is about telling people what they should be doing. There is not a single symbol, there is not a single sign which ends with a question mark. Very few. I mean, I have
No,
not seen
no.
one. It's fascinating.
No,
isn't it?
it's a dogma, and it sounds just like the Christian evangelical preacher. Here it is. Here's the condition, right? Here's the condition. Do this, right? Do this, and thou shalt be saved, right? This is the dogma. Do this and thou shalt be saved. Okay, so my question is, safety is good. What's the this? And then, of course, when you get hurt, safety says to you, oh yeah, but you didn't do it properly.
And that's where we got this whole idea of moral superiority from regulation.
Yeah, and yeah, that's right. And so the safety person can never be wrong because you never filled out the form properly.
Great, great. Pedro, do you want to ask a question?
Perhaps there's more to say about how can we put people or push people towards dissonance and set aside such a deeply rooted belief.
Great
It's,
question.
it's clearly not
Yeah.
an easy path to go down to.
I think a big problem is the problem of compliance. You see, this is a compliance thing, right? So if I want to be saved in a religion, I have to comply to the requirements of the religion. If I want to be saved in safety, I have to comply to the requirements of that. So the last thing we want is dissonance or questioning, because if you're questioning, then you're not compliant. So one of the big problems in the risk and safety industry is the very idea of compliance, because anyone who challenges it is non-compliant.
Well, Rob, it's so coherent with where we started off from, that if you assume that your job is to save lives and all you're doing is counting acts of unsafety, then obviously you are always going to be morally superior and always going to be the
Yes.
one in the position of telling. It makes
Yeah.
absolute no sense that anyone in the world can question your authority because you're always right.
Yeah.
And I think
Yep.
the powerful message here is that if all we are doing is focusing on acts of unsafety or conditions of unsafety, whichever way we like, we will always be in that position of superiority and power. And,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and which gives us the sight. But I'm just talking to myself basically. It's so powerful.
Yeah,
It's-
no, you're right. You're right. Your thinking is right. That because it's right because the evidence is there. The evidence is overwhelming that the risk and safety industry is a dogmatic industry that tells people this: if you follow this procedure, you'll be saved.
Yeah, isn't it, Rob? I mean, you can clearly see through religion in every aspect of safety, and yet people run away from it. It's so fascinating. No one wants to talk about it.
If you go to any anthropologist anywhere in the world and say, tell me about culture, they go to a civilization and the first thing that's important in culture is religion. Wow. Wow.
Fascinating. Absolutely.
Wow.
And one wonders, where does the belief come from then?
Yeah, very good question.
Isn't it? Yeah, yeah. What is the
From
the
science.
bedrock of all belief?
From
Of course it
science.
is.
Yes, I love that. It's from science. I love it.
Yes, yes. Great, Rob. I think this is a great chat. Is there anything else you would like to say, Rob? Because you took a lot of notes before coming here. Is there anything else you want to say before we leave?
Yeah. Look. I think people have got to make a big, think hard about the difference in between believing that you help save lives and speaking the language that you save lives. I think even if you believe it, don't say it.
Yes, but how? And now you are talking about you're counteracting your own self, which is if language is metaphor is so embodied, how do you detach yourself from it? It's a difficult thing, Rob, because the moment your belief moves, your metaphors move.
Yeah, correct.
So
Which
I think,
means.
So
Yeah, go
can I
ahead.
say something? So I think
Yeah.
what happens is that in most instances, as soon as, and I'm laughing because this is very funny to me, is that the moment the belief changes, the first thing that moves is your language. And what you're saying is, don't change your belief, just move your language. But at some stage,
Yeah, correct.
you will get there because it's inescapable.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
It is inescapable. And this is so interesting because people, even in the risk and safety world today, Rob, people talk about language, but they don't quite understand the connection between language and belief. It's so fascinating.
No, they don't.
No. Is there anything else, Pedro or Rob, you want to say?
Well, I mean, I've mentioned science, a bit of a joke, but I think that's very much it. The beliefs are excluded because and that's a belief in itself. The belief is
correct.
that a belief system is not needed and should not be included at all explicitly because science is there to replace it.
Yes, except science and the scientific method is a belief.
Yeah.
And there's lots of academics at the moment that completely tears to shred the scientific method.
And we are going to talk about this in Canberra, the myth of the scientific method.
Yeah. I read a book recently by a quantum physicist, right? And he says everything that we believe and have been told about science does not make sense in quantum physics. And then he pulls out a Buddhist book and he said, now read the text of this Buddhist book and read the text of my book, and they sound the same.
Of course it does.
This is a quantum physicist. So this idea of thinking that science is objective and it doesn't involve belief is another myth, which I think lots of risk and safety people hide behind.
I have a wonderful picture from Athens. So you have an angel welcoming a person coming into the organization. and then you have a person who's just confessing, and the priest is
Yep.
reading out the scripture, and then you have another
Yep.
person vomiting out snakes and whatnot because it's their time to and it's all there. I'll put it out there, and it tells everything about how non-conformances are dealt with through confession, and what happens
Yep.
if you don't confess, you go to the hell down there, and if you
Yep.
did, your salvation is guaranteed. It's all there in that picture. It's beautiful.
Yep.
It's so safety. Yeah, great. Anything else
Yep.
from anyone? No.
No.